do want to kind of talk about what Hartman is suggesting in this article of his. And essentially, what he's saying, just to sort of simplify it, is that, and basically, he's basically saying that Trump, and I'm going to share my screen. Trump is basically talking about domestic terrorism and organized political violence. And he's basically saying that the political violence that the U.S. is experiencing, of course, he's only really talking about the political violence against people that are his allies. He's not talking about the political violence against people who are not his allies. He's pretty specific here. All the examples he gives are of Republicans who have been attacked. No examples of the Democrats that have been slain. So it's very, very one-sided in his examples, probably not incidentally, but essentially, he says that heinous assassinations and other acts of political violence have dramatically increased in recent years. And he basically goes on to say that it was preceded by the assassination of the healthcare executive and assassination attempts against Justice Brett Kavanaugh, um, and talks about ICE, violence against ICE. Let me put this in the chat so you guys can read it as well, since we are fact finding together. This is a memo by Trump that's from whitehouse.gov, so you can't argue this isn't his words. He said, "This political violence is not a series of isolated incidents and does not emerge organically." Now, that is an assertion that when I read the rest of this, I did not find any defense for. So I'm going to put that up as an assertion that I don't think is defendable. I don't want to hit on that one first because it's not the most important one. Bear with me. Give me 1 second. I gotta pull up my sheet. Where is the other let me, here we go. Here we go. All right. So sorry about that. I had to get in the right Google Doc. So we're talking about the Hartman report. So this is one assertion. So the next thing is that he says that it's organized campaigns of targeted intimidation, radicalization, threats, and violence designed to silence opposing speech, limit political activity, change or direct policy outcomes, and prevent the functioning of democratic society. And interestingly, I will make the argument that this very memo is doing exactly these things. So, as usual, Trump is the king of projection, and I will argue that he's actually doing all of this stuff with this memo and enforcing it by law. So he says a new law enforcement strategy that investigates all participants of these criminal and terroristic conspiracies, including organized structures, networks, entities, organizations, funding sources, and predicate actions behind them is required. So he says these campaigns begin by isolating and dehumanizing specific targets to justify murder and other violent action against them. And they do so through anonymous chat forums, in-person meetings, social media, and even educational institutions. So he's basically saying all of these are fair game for the targeting that he's going to have against the people that he considers terrorists, right? That's what his memo is saying himself. He's saying all of these folks, anonymous chat forums, are fair game for being infiltrated by the FBI, essentially. So these campaigns escalate to organized doxing, where the private or identifying information of their targets, such as home address, phone number, etc., are exposed to the public with the explicit intent of encouraging others to harass, intimidate, or violently assault them. And then So these campaigns are coordinated and perpetrated by actors who have developed a comprehensive strategy to achieve specific policy goals through radicalization and violent intimidation. And the let's get to the most important. There are common and recurrent motivations and I don't know how to indicia uniting this pattern of violent and terroristic activities under the umbrella of self-described anti-fascism. So these movements are profound or portray foundational American principles, um, support for law enforcement and border control as fascist to justify and encourage acts of violent revolution. So this is essentially saying if you call the government fascist, you could be associated with these groups that are considered domestic terrorist organizations. That's what he's building up to. So he literally goes on to say the anti-fascist lie has become the organizing rallying cry used by domestic terrorists to wage a violent assault against democratic institutions, constitutional rights, and fundamental American liberties. Common threads animating this violent conduct include, and so now this is the way that he is labeling people that could be that he would consider um, like part of the domestic terrorism group: anti-Americanism, anti-capitalism, anti-Christianity, support for the overthrow of the U.S. government, which ironically he was the one that gave a pardon to all the people who tried to overthrow the U.S. government and kill all the senators and congressmen essentially that opposed Trump. Um, Extremism on migration, which basically means that, we all know what Trump means by extremism on migration, race, and gender. And if we don't know that, then we can talk about it. Hostility towards those who hold traditional American values on family, religion, and morality. So this is what Trump is basically saying. And here's my assertion is going to be uh, so these are the qualifications for essentially being associated or being potentially a domestic terrorist threat. The groups and entities that perpetrate this extremism have created a movement that embraces and elevates violence to achieve policy outcomes. I would be curious to know what policy outcomes he thinks they're trying to achieve, including justifying additional assassinations. For example, Charlie Kirk's alleged assassin engraved the bullets used in murder with a so-called anti-fascist rhetoric. He did carve stuff onto the bullets saying "Eat this fascist" or something like that. But um, you know, I haven't seen that assassin tied to any organized anything. Um, so the United States requires a national strategy to investigate and disrupt networks, entities, and organizations that foment political violence so that law enforcement can intervene in criminal conspiracies before they result in violent political acts. Through this comprehensive strategy, law enforcement will disband and uproot networks, entities, and organizations that promote organized violence, violent intimidation, conspiracies against rights. This is important because this is the one that organized violence and violent intimidation, like I'm all against that. I think we should always be preventing that, but we should have prevented that on September, or January 6th as well, but those guys got off the hook. So, but conspiracies against rights, let's delve into that one because that's the one that I think is the most relevant here. Most relevant because it's the one that has the slipperiest slope and also the and other efforts to disrupt the functioning of a democratic society. So what does that even mean necessarily? And how can we decide whether or not a group is doing that or not? So this is uh, So the qualifications for scrutiny is conspiracy against rights, other disrupt or and other efforts to disrupt the functioning of a democratic society, and anti-Americanism, anti-capitalism, etc. Right? So that's my first, and then it goes in to say the National Joint Terrorism Task Force and its local offices shall coordinate a supervised and comprehensive national strategy to investigate, prosecute, and disrupt entities or individuals engaged in acts of political and violence and intimidation designed to suppress lawful political activity or obstruct rule of law. So this strategy shall include the investigatory and prosecutorial measures set forth in this section. So I'm curious if anyone disagrees that Trump is essentially saying that conspiracies against rights, other efforts to disrupt the functioning of a democratic society, and um, these attributes are basically prime for being looked at under a lens and observed digitally by the government for suspected domestic terrorism. So that said, that's our first question. So we're going to try to keep very laser focused on one assertion at a time. I'm also going to open this document up so everybody will have access to put suggested comments in. So if you have an assertion that you want to put in there, um, you can put it below, but I'm going to try to curate assertions that I think are relevant to the conversation. But I'm open to taking guest assertions as well once we go through this one. So Rami, do you agree that Trump is essentially saying that these people should be subject to government scrutiny? Do you
Uh,
agree with that or
yeah,
disagree with it?
I I agree with it, but I think it's also connected to the fact that as soon as the Patriot Act was enacted a quarter century ago, that this sort of thing was inevitable.
Well, the Patriot Act actually said that someone has to have contact with someone that is a suspected spy. So there was already a very limited, narrow scope of violating the Fourth Amendment. I will agree with you that if you're saying that the Patriot Act violates the Fourth Amendment of digital search and seizure, I agree with that completely, and I did a whole event on that, so we're not going to cover it again tonight. But I would say this is basically
Okay,
taking this
I
to a level that's unprecedented, except if you go to, the Sedition Act even, I don't think went to quite, well, maybe it did, but since then, I don't know that there's been anything like this. So I guess really what I'm looking for is, does anyone not agree that Trump said that these two groups of people are should be subject to scrutiny? So if you're raising your hand, I'm expecting that you don't agree with this assertion. Because if everybody agrees with the assertion, we're going to move on. If someone disagrees with the assertion, then we're going to talk about it in a little more depth and do some fact seeking. Okay, Carrie, go ahead.
Yeah. So first, I just want to say I highly doubt Trump drafted this. This reeks of a lawyer. When you can't pronounce a word in there, you know it didn't come from Trump's mind because he speaks at about a fourth grade level. And there's a lot of language in here that's specifically geared to achieve legal effect. So that's the first thing. But
Just so you
second,
know, this is a presidential memoranda. So I'm not saying he
oh,
wrote it personally, but
okay,
this is from his office and
yeah,
with the power of the president behind it. That's what
correct.
matters, not that it was
Yes.
his words
Absolutely.
or
The
his
the
like,
office stands behind it, but just
yes.
I mean there's a subtle difference between what's going
Okay.
on in Trump's brain and what the power of the office is
I
achieving.
long felt that Trump is not the problem. It's the people that support Trump that are the problem. So that's
Okay.
a different story.
No, we're absolutely on the same page. But the
Yeah.
other thing is, unless you think that treason or sedition is not possible, the devil is going to lurk in the enforcement of this stuff, right? Because I think it's conceivable that somebody could commit treason or sedition. It's a matter of who they can charge with it and who they will charge or do charge. And that's really what's at issue.
Well, I'm making the assertion that Trump is saying that spying on all these people, basically people who are quote unquote anti-American, right? Like, what does it mean to be anti-American? If you criticize the US foreign policy, does that make you anti-American? He could argue it does. And so
Sure, he
immediately,
could.
as soon as you criticize the US government for anything, you can
Yep.
be spied on by the FBI. That's the assertion I'm making. And
Now,
my
the
question is, do
thing,
you disagree with that assertion?
well, I guess I'll just finish up because I know you want to get moving on. That a lot of this, you know, the law says something, and then you act, and then you're charged or you're not. And if you think you were charged incorrectly, there's a process to go through.
There is.
So how the Supreme Court ends up ruling on this stuff is a big fat question mark, and we'll have to see. It's a legal process. It's not just an answer. Because like what, the FBI has been conducting illegal searches since it was founded.
Do you think that like that's okay?
Of course not. But I
Okay.
think that
So
that it's
this
it's one
is
thing to rend your shirt and say, well, this isn't right, and it's another thing to actually stop it,
But
right?
how frequently and what, if you want to start to look at the frequency with which the FBI has done illegal searches, try to support that. I'm going to put that as a separate. Um, you're gonna assert that the FBI. This is
Oh,
Kerry's
I'm just saying
assertion.
that ever since who was the first director of the CIA? I'm blanking on his name.
CIA or FBI?
FBI. Sorry.
Yeah, that was Hoover, J. Edgar Hoover.
Hoover. Yeah. I mean, that guy was he had his own little shadow government running there since the beginning. I mean, that's why
He
he was
sure
in
did.
power for so long. And it's pretty clear. I mean, most of what he was doing was totally illegal. It didn't stop him from doing it.
So go ahead
Um,
and put your I'm gonna do this like not as the thing that's the current topic, but I'm gonna let
yep.
you put your evidence that the FBI regularly conducts illegal searches pre-Trump.
Oh, sure.
Um,
Yeah,
and
I can do
so
that.
put your evidence for a large a
Yeah,
large quantity of illegal searches
sure.
by the FBI. Now,
Okay.
Paul, go ahead.
Well, you made the comment that nothing like this has been seen, at least in this last 2 centuries. I wondered if
I,
you
I
wanted to
don't care
address.
if it's been seen historically. That's not the assertion we're defending right now.
Okay, no, that's
The
fine, but you
assertion we're
commented, and I
defending is
want,
very specifically that Trump is saying that these people, anyone that says anything against the US government, can be spied on by the FBI.
yeah, that was my question since you brought that up. I wanted to know if you were going to address it now or later, so we can do it later.
Okay.
Well,
Does
if I may
anyone,
just, if
I
I
don't
may just
know.
point out,
Okay.
what is this business about anti-capitalism? If I think that capitalism has gone way overboard, does that make me a target in in their world? Yeah, I think it does.
yes,
I am no fan of Christianity. Does that make me a target?
yes,
Hell yes.
yes.
So you look at this content, and I think we have to ask, what's the real motivation behind this? It's very clear to me.
Well, it's justifying the spying on pretty much almost every American citizen that isn't 100% lockstep with pro-America, pro everything that Trump's base stands for. If you're not pro everything that Trump's base stands for, you're allowed to be spied on by the FBI. That's
Yep.
essentially my assertion. So what I'm looking for is anyone that disagrees with that assertion. So for the people with your hands up, I'm just gonna ask you to say, first of all, yes, I disagree with that assertion, and along with why. Why do you disagree with it? Now, if you don't
Um, I,
disagree with that assertion, we're going to move on to the next assertion.
I might ask you to quit saying pro-American. It's pro-Trump's America.
Correct. That's because this is coming from Trump's perspective, so it's pro-Trump's America. So,
I don't know how to raise my hand. Could you tell me how?
hi, Sherry. At the
Oh,
bottom, if you put your mouse over the screen,
I
there
don't have
should
a
be
mouse.
a like raise hand option.
I
Um,
see mute, start video, participants chat, reactions, share, and
reactions.
leave.
Go under
Oh,
reactions and then you should see it.
Oh, because
Okay.
I would like to say something. I'm scared because I never have before, but
That's
I wondered
okay.
if I could. Oh, good,
Go
great.
ahead. While you're here, Sherry, tell us what's on
Yeah.
your mind.
Okay, well, it's been on my mind for a few years now. Um, I'm not sure everyone is aware that it was during the um, sorry, I'm so nervous. The Obama administration that it was legalized for the U.S. government to directly to direct allies in the media, academia. There was a whole group of allies to craft stories that would be oppositional to, well, let's just say national enemies, like Russia at the time. And it was called the Smith-Mundt Modernization Act. What they did was they threw out the Smith-Mundt Act, which made it illegal ever since World War II. They found out people were so easily affected by propaganda that they actually made it illegal for 47 years, about or something like that. But during the Obama administration, they legalized it, and while they did that, it was part of the National
So
Defense Authorization.
Sherry,
Yes.
we're really focused
Okay.
right now on just anyone that disagrees with this assertion. That's
Okay.
all I want to hear from is
There's
anyone that
one thing I
disagrees.
feel is important to say. Sorry, that this is not a Trump administration invention. That the category under which
So
he's
you'll
claiming.
have to, Sherry, you'll have to, if you
Oh,
disagree,
well, I just want to say this. I'm sorry. The category domestic terrorist did not exist until it was made part of law in the earlier administration. There was no such thing.
Sherry, that's like saying that
Yes.
the gun didn't exist until the first person invented the gun, and therefore someone that shoots someone today is guilty because that person invented the gun. The
The
word
law didn't
domestic terrorist
exist.
is not the thing that's to blame here. The thing that's to
No.
blame is the fact that Trump is calling anyone that speaks out against the US government as a domestic terrorist. That's the
Right.
concern.
But the category didn't exist, and it wasn't conceived to do this. But the government wasn't allowed to do this until domestic terrorism became an actual law. It was legalized during the previous administration. The thing that gets me upset is this: that it's constantly seen as a. It seems like Trump is magnetic, and everything is magnetized to him. He's the one who's causing or inventing these things. But the ability for him to
Sherry,
do these
Trump didn't
things.
invent the gun, but he's the one shooting the gun. So please, let's go to the people who have their hands up. You can put
Okay,
your
I'm
hand up,
still concerned about who invented
Sherry.
the gun. That's all I'm
Sherry,
saying. Yes.
Sherry, it's fine. So, Vinny, do you disagree with this assertion?
I disagree with it, and the
Okay, what do
reason
you
why
disagree with about it?
I disagree with the whole whole conversation about the First Amendment and all that other stuff. And the reason why I disagree with that is because there are people who are going to sue anybody who tries to uh, stop people from legally speaking based on the First Amendment. So, as an example, we just had this situation in Georgia. The FBI went in, they took ballots, and we got 15 million people suing. So that's going to
Yeah, but
be
Vinny, this isn't about lawsuit. This is about whether the FBI spies on you in your home.
right. Well, the
This is
FBI
without your
definitely
permission. The FBI is spying on your personal messages, and I will go into the types of tools they include. They include hacking tools
right.
that the
All right,
government has purchased in order to spy on these folks, us folks, because I am one of them, I'm sure.
right. So again, they're going to have to follow the law to most part. As we know, the FBI doesn't always follow the law. And one
Yes, we
example
do
of
know
that,
that. And we know that Trump is very publicly, again, Vinny, you haven't said anything that disagrees with the assertion. You're saying that there will be checks and balances. That's different than
correct.
disagreeing with the assertion. I only want, guys, we will move very
Okay,
slowly here if
so
we
the only
have
thing,
to. We've
yeah, the
spent
only thing I'll
just let
add
me
to that,
finish,
I
Vinny.
think,
Vinny, let me finish.
yeah,
We've spent half an hour on the very first, very simple assertion. All I did is take from Trump's own statement the assertion that he's going after people like this.
right.
And there should be no disagreement about this. And I'd like to move on to the next assertion. And unless someone can actually provide a substantial reason not to agree with this assertion, I'm going to move on to the next assertion.
I will. It's
I
his
would
fault.
just,
Hey, Garrett.
I'll prove it's false.
Go ahead and
I
prove
just
it's
want to
false.
add that I think violence
Go,
will have.
Vinny, you can say there's checks and balances. Great, checks and balances. But there's no check and balance to the FBI spying on people without any due process. There's no check and balance to that because you don't know that they're doing it and you never will.
Somebody's going to sue them. They're going to sue them.
Garrett, can you repeat
No
the
one can
assertion?
sue them because
Connection's
no
been.
one can sue them because no one knows that it's happening. How do you know if the FBI is spying on you, Vinny? How do you know they're not already?
Garrett, can you repeat the assertion? My
The
connection's been
assertion
bad.
is that the qualifications for scrutiny by the FBI are, and these are direct quotes, conspiracies against rights and other efforts to disrupt the functioning of a democratic society, and that these are the views that hold someone as suspicious according to the US government, meaning subject to scrutiny by the FBI and legal enforcement by the government.
Got it. Thanks.
So,
Can
Gene,
Can I ask, aren't there a couple lawyers here? I put something in the chat about the Fourth Amendment specifically, in that my understanding is that if individuals act on behalf of the government, then that's a Fourth Amendment violation. But if individuals are just acting sort of on their own accord or by another group that isn't specifically directed by a governmental entity, then no matter how invasive it is, it's not illegal and it can't be subject to being sued. Is that wrong?
It might be illegal, but it wouldn't be a violation of the Fourth Amendment. I
Okay,
am a
so
lawyer.
the illegality comes down to individual local and state laws, or is it subject to specific federal laws? Because the
Well,
Fourth Amendment is specific to the government, which is the FBI, spying on people.
it would depend on whether there is a criminal statute against the particular activity. But an
Again, to
individual
Garrett's
cannot
point
violate,
about,
the
again, to
individual
Garrett's point
cannot
about,
violate the Fourth Amendment.
and so the Fourth Amendment applies to government entities.
I'd have to look at it again, but to the federal government.
yeah, it is to the
specifically,
federal
I believe.
government search and seizure. So
Right.
theoretically, if a citizen does it, though, it's still illegal. It's just illegal under a different, under common laws, not against the amendment.
But there are ways to get around that.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
theoretically, that like if it's illegal, and you know someone's doing it, you should get like now if someone like hacks your computer and you find out they are and you prosecute them, they can go to jail for that. So there are laws against that, but the chances are good that most people on this call's computers are infected by something or someone. I hate to make you paranoid, but like technology wise, like most computers are infected by something, and the chances are you'll never know. But anyway, I want to hear Paul try to claim this assertion is wrong when I quoted it directly from Trump's memo.
Except you didn't. Okay, so first of all, 2A, that's the first assertion, is not correct. If you will look at the paragraph,
I'm only talking about 2B.
well, 2A is false. So if you have a false premise, 2B doesn't
Oh,
work.
okay. I see what you're saying. So
Okay,
you're saying
so
that Trump says if you hold these characteristics, you share them with domestic terrorists.
yeah, that's not what he says. And I'm going to
Okay.
go ahead and read directly from the actual document, and you can scroll
This
down
is the
if you want.
document.
That's fine. You can scroll down if you want. I'm looking at it too. All right. The way the paragraph is formatted is correct college, which means your hypothesis is the first sentence followed by support for that hypothesis. It starts, there are common recurrent motivations in indicia uniting this pattern of violent and terroristic activities under the umbrella of self-described anti-fascism. This sets what is being laid out right in front of you. Okay. This is not Trump says if you are one of these things, we are going after you. This is purely identification, common recurrent motivations. And then it goes on to list what those different commonalities are for identification purposes. And it's basically tailored to Antifa. Antifa includes anti-capitalist terrorism. They break ATMs out of banks. They destroy things that they consider capitalist icons. So that is part of the identification for those terrorists they are trying to identify. This is not in any way Trump saying, if you are anti-capitalism, you are now a target. The first sentence is what should be there, not Trump says, if you are one of these things, we're coming after you. It's
Well,
simply
if I may ask you a
identifying
question,
Antifa.
may I ask you a question? Do you
Yes.
think that, I mean, you've said what the rule is and how you interpret these things, but how do you know that his White House, and in particular Stephen Miller, is following your rule? Isn't
It's
it
not my,
possible that somebody who drafted this made a convenient statement at the beginning and then played a shell game with the rest of it?
are you asking me to prove a negative? I'm not going to just presume that the document's misdirecting everybody and lying. The assertion A is incorrect. Okay. Trump does not say, and this document does not say, if you hold these values, we're coming after you. It is, again, common recurrent motivations and indicia. Now, I will provide later, when we get to it, the National Strategy for Countering Domestic Terrorism, dated June 2021 by Joe Biden, which is essentially the identical document to this, except it's identifying right wing terrorists and instructing the FBI to investigate right wing terrorist organizations. And you will see exactly the same structure.
Well,
So
can you give us the
this is
language?
just to be clear, ChatGPT basically says that this is intentionally creating a profiling framework, even if not prosecutable. It is a profiling framework, which does sort of support my assertion
No,
that
it
this
doesn't.
is a targeted group of people, or these are things that
That
make
is
someone
true. That is
suspect.
true. But a profiling framework has to include the entire list. You can't just pull out you're anti-capitalism, so we're going to sick the FBI on you. This is an identification of groups they consider possible domestic terrorists. Okay, and that's it. It says so in the first sentence, and the sentence that identifies what it's going to explain to you. It says these are the common recurrent motivations of anti-fascist groups, and then it lists the ways that anti-fascist groups identify themselves. This is not in any way Donald Trump saying, if you're anti-capitalist, we're coming after you. If you're anti-American, we're coming after you. It's simply describing who they consider Antifa. They specifically name Antifa,
Got
and
it.
it's saying this is what Antifa looks like. Antifa has all of these
Paul, can you
characteristics.
lower your voice just a little bit? You're yelling.
Hello?
Yeah, Lori, did you want to jump in there?
Oh, I'm sorry. I can't seem to handle my phone. Yeah, I'm trying to get back to the meeting, but I guess you could hear me. What was I going to say? Okay, I think that what's really wrong with what's going on now is that the United States is very polarized.
Yeah,
So
we see that.
the
So
left is,
Lori, we're specifically talking about whether or not, like, if you want to chime in, specifically chime in on whether or not this assertion is true. The assertion is that Trump says that if you hold these following values if you read his memo, that
uh-huh,
you are basically implicated with the groups that also hold these values that could make you suspect and suspect to being looked at more closely by the U.S. government.
yes.
So I think Paul doesn't agree with that, but I'm curious
Yeah,
if
yeah.
we could do a thumbs up on, well, let's do a quick poll. Um, Let me see.
Garrett, do you disagree that this is mainly targeting Antifa? That
Yeah, I
that's
do.
the thrust of what this is
Yeah,
going
no,
for?
he's
Okay.
just targeting anyone that disagrees with him.
It
He's saying
literally says
these are
anti-fascist.
attributes of Antifa, but like
It
the
names
memo,
Antifa.
otherwise the
Garrett,
memo would be titled Antifa.
It
It
Garrett,
names
says
Antifa.
it says
Garrett.
Paul, I
countering
respect.
domestic terrorism and organized political violence. That's
Right.
what
And
it's
then the
about.
Sure, but
paragraph you're referencing where you're creating your premise, it says in the second sentence, these movements portray foundational American principles as fascist to justify and encourage active violent revolution. This anti-fascist lie. He's naming Antifa. And then
No,
he's
no.
going
So
on to say, this is what Antifa believes.
Paul, I
if
respectfully
if if
would
if,
suggest that there is
if
such
I
a thing as
may,
propaganda, and interpreting this
If you're going
document,
to
I
think
think we
this is
have to take that
propaganda,
into
why are we
account.
examining it?
I don't
Because
know. I didn't.
it's being used by the FBI to look at U.S. citizens and ICE to look at U.S. citizens. Actually, ICE, who has a bigger budget than the FBI, it's being used by ICE to look at citizens is what's potentially going on here, and that's
That's
what
right.
Pam
Okay, so the
Bondi. I'll
premise
go
is
into
it's
my
not at propaganda.
hold on, Paul. I will go into the next assertion that I want to make is that Pam Bondi is basically enforcing this. And so that will be the second premise if we can get to it. It's been 40 minutes on the first one. So
Yeah, look, I just wanted to
Garrett,
say, I think what Paul is trying to say, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that you got to look at you got to separate the character of Trump that he portrays to the public with what's actually written on the statement. I mean, if you look at the document without thinking about the character of Trump as a document that any administration would send out, there's a lot of vague and a lot of holes in there that any jury, any lawyer could argue for and against. So I don't agree that it's specific to Antifa. I think it's a little broader than that, but the document itself can be construed in a variety of different ways. And I think we're getting too caught up in Trump, the character, and forgetting about the other systems that make up part of our country, and that has to be taken into account when we're looking at something like this. This is not just Trump is not speaking this and making this one of the commandments. This is
we've
a
talked
document
about
that's
we've
been
talked about
posted from the
Trump.
White House.
Yeah, we've talked about Trump's efforts to get rid of all voices that don't agree with Trump from
Yeah, and that's he could say
government.
that as much as he wants,
Oh, he's
but
actually done it. No, he's
you
actually done it.
know, well,
And if I
He's
can, if I
fired.
there's a
He's
can,
whole bunch of
fired
people
more
right here
merit. Hold on, hold on.
who
He's
are
fired
doing the
more.
opposite.
Hold on, Renee. He's fired more people that were considered meritocracy hires than any recent U.S. president. So, Trump is the one that did that, and he did it for political reasons, and he very intentionally used the Heritage Foundation's list of conservative ideological people to replace them. So
Mm.
this is very much happened, and we talked about it on other nights. So tonight we're not
And
going to talk about that.
Okay.
We have covered that other
Garrett,
nights. I'm not going to cover it
okay,
tonight.
I'm done.
Garrett, can you just clarify for the poll what is true?
So
What's the
yeah,
assertion?
maybe I have to run the poll again. So what we're saying is true is that Trump says that if you hold these values, you share these characteristics with domestic terrorists, right? He's saying Antifa has these characteristics. If you also have these characteristics, they are characteristics that you share with Antifa. And the implication there is when he says later on in the memo, he says we are going to scrutinize anyone with these characteristics. And these are the characteristics that he is talking about. And he says, if you hold these characteristics, then Paul, you can't wiggle around that one. Like the fact is, he's saying you share characteristics with Antifa if you're anti-American, and therefore you are subject to government scrutiny. And so, essentially, like, yes, there are checks and balances to Vinny's perspective. If you
Garrett,
have great enough security to know that the FBI is spying on you, great, go sue the US government. Good luck with that. But
Garrett,
you know what? Most of us don't have that capability.
it's the same as saying you share characteristics with Hitler if you're a vegan.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
um, if I can,
This is someone with power that can then use the FBI to harness it against these people. So Trump's memo is very specifically targeting people who are anti-American, quote unquote. It's very clear that he's targeting these people, and you seem to be one of the very few people that think that that's not the case. Now
I
let's.
didn't say it wasn't the case. We're
You did say
addressing
it
this
wasn't the
assertion.
case. This is the assertion.
Your
You're saying
assertion
the
is
assertion
wrong for
is
the reasons
false.
I stated.
So
That
let's.
you actually okay. So first of all, you actually changed.
The assertion is written down. I haven't changed any of it, Paul. I haven't changed anything. The assertion is written down.
Mhm.
I described it for people in simple language. That's all I did. And maybe you came to an about face because I described it for you in simple language. And if you now agree with the assertion, great. Let's move on to the next one. So I want to clarify that basically this is what the assertion means. I would love to do a true false poll. We now that we don't know whether or not people know whether or not the first poll was correct, like what the assertion was. I'm going to launch the poll one more time. So if you think that, this is basically saying, that in this memo that Trump is saying, if you share these attributes with domestic terrorists, that you could be scrutinized by the FBI.
Can you at least explain why my analogy is wrong?
Because your analogy is about something completely separated logically from this. You're using an analogy that you're asking me to prove a negative. Tell me why my analogy is wrong.
If
So,
okay, I'll give you an example. If Antifa wears masks, and they do, does that mean ICE is like Antifa
oh,
because
it's
they
a
wear
logical
masks?
fallacy. It's a logical fallacy
What's
to
the
say that
logical
just
fallacy?
it's a logical, listen to me. It's a logical fallacy for Trump to say that because I share the anti-American sentiment with Antifa that I should be gone after. But
It's not what
Trump,
he said. That's
I,
nowhere in the document.
it is very much implied in the document. And in
What?
fact, ChatGPT agrees with that. And in fact, if
Also,
we look at
ICE is the state, Antifa is the citizen. So wearing masks is very different.
so this is the poll, 13 to 4 to 6 on true, false, not sure. So we're gonna count this as 13 agree, 4 disagree, 6 not sure. So let's go to the next assertion, which is essentially that
If we're going to talk about Antifa, what on earth is it?
Antifa is nothing. It's just like it's
I
not even
know.
an organization. There's no leader. There's nothing. It's
I
just
Defined in
know.
the document.
people that are
Goodness.
against fascism, self-declared against fascism,
Right.
and that's it. Like,
It's
Well,
like
I
Trump
don't like
derangement
fascism.
syndrome didn't stick, so they had to come up with something else.
It's
Listen, I'd like to move on. We've had
yeah,
several
we're
people
gonna
with their
move on. We're
hand
gonna
up,
move
and
on.
Paul specifically and Sean keep interrupting, and it's not helping the flow. And I'd appreciate it if they were to let other people speak. Thank you.
Aaron, I've got 1.1 question.
Yeah.
All right, my 1 point is I think that you're missing the money making component in this situation. It's not the FBI specifically, but it's the private contractors. I believe the proper way to see the situation is that at the start of this term of POTUS, Project Stargate was announced, which is basically a whole lot of monitoring of everyone, and that's already been in place for the last generation. And then
No, I'm
that
sorry, that's inaccurate. It was
those
only,
government contractors.
I'm sorry, Rami, that's
You're
inaccurate.
saying,
The only things that were able to be monitored um were conversations between US citizens talking with non-US citizens where the non-US citizens were suspected terrorists. That's the only
officially,
thing that Snowden uncovered. That was the only
I
like narrow area where the government was allowed to do things without a warrant. So that is the only place that has ever been allowable, publicly speaking. If someone wants to challenge that assertion, put it in the Google
yeah,
Doc.
I well, look, I challenge right now because
Put it in the Google Doc,
I've
Rami. We're
started.
not gonna
Are
we're
you
not
going?
gonna jump right to
Okay,
it. I want you to take
it's
the time to do the
okay.
research, put your source down in the Google Doc.
Garrett, I've done the research, sir.
Then put it in the Google Doc, Rami.
Are you okay then? When I'm back on the machine, let me make the question. What makes Chat GPT authoritative?
So I'm not using ChatGPT to be an authoritative source. I'm using Arnold and Porter, which is a law firm, and I'm using the government's very own website. Do you believe whitehouse.gov can speak for the White House?
Words.
Well, that's all I'm using, Rami. So please stop it with the ChatGPT nonsense. ChatGPT can answer more questions more accurately than you, probably about you in your own field, let alone other areas. So please stop saying ChatGPT is not a source. You sound like the people saying Wikipedia is not a valid source, which is nonsense. It's shown as more accurate or as accurate as Encyclopedia Britannica. So let's stop with the criticism of tech because tech is far more accurate than most other sources And it's far
It's
more
not a
accurate than
matter
wherever
of
you're getting
effect.
your information
It's
from
a question of whether or not it can be
about where
gained.
government is spying on U.S. citizens. So let's go to
Okay,
the second
whatever.
assertion, which is that Pam Bondi, basically, let's go to the memo. Federal law enforcement will target individuals, organizations, and funders whom the U.S. Department of Justice contends are quote unquote domestic terrorists, under a definition that links political violence to anti-fascist ideologies. So that is the very memo that we talked about, which basically says that federal law enforcement is going to target these individuals. So this is, if you want to challenge Arnold and Porter, challenge Arnold and Porter and say they're not a valid law firm and that they would post something erroneous about, Attorney General Pam Bondi's internal order. And then it references NSPM 7, which is the memo that we just looked at. So essentially, now the second assertion is that federal law enforcement will target individuals, organizations, and funders that are considered domestic terrorists. So it would be hard to argue that, so this is the assertion. It'd be hard to argue that that's not true. Does anyone want to challenge that? Sarika, you haven't spoken yet. I'm going to let you go, but please tell me you're challenging this.
What, sorry, what was the most recent question? Challenging?
That federal law enforcement will target individuals, organizations, and funders whom the U.S. Department of Justice contends are domestic terrorists under a definition that links political violence to anti-fascist ideologies, which is essentially the memo that we just talked about.
Okay, well, um, I think it's interesting if maybe I can circle back to that in like 1 minute. Like before when we said how the Biden administration had put out the same memorandum,
You broke
the
up there. So you said the
yes,
Biden administration put out the same memorandum.
Yes,
Can
I
you
linked
can
it.
you sort of link to that?
same memorandum. I don't a link.
Yeah, you're saying that the Biden administration put
Oh, I
out a
think just
similar.
basically from your chat GPT or ideologically, it seems like, one side or the other might do that. With this, first of all, when he mentions the assassination of Charlie Kirk and the United Healthcare CEO, both of those kids, or Luigi Mangione was 27, they had handwritten notes. They didn't have, I don't think Luigi had like a chat GPT history of and outlining his motive and intentions. He had handwritten notes. So even this FBI raid wouldn't have been effective in
Oh,
that
I'm sure
way.
that they had plenty of evidence that they were anti the people that they were on their
And
digital footprint. Like if you think you could comb through their computer as a forensic ICE agent or FBI agent and not find evidence that they were, troubled people that wanted to commit violence, I think you would have trouble defending that assertion. Let's put it that way.
yeah,
The
but
note the note is irrelevant.
we're still not at a point like, I mean, God forbid, or whatever mysteries forbid, like, 10 years from now, this is an assassination attempt and comes out like a really sophisticated way of using LLMs to procure information. I mean,
Again,
sure.
I only want to hear if someone has their hand up. I only want to hear if you don't agree with this assertion. We can move through this quickly or slowly. The way we're going really slowly, and I don't want to do that. I think we can move faster. So maybe I'm just going to move faster and just take a poll. Does anyone disagree or agree that this assertion is true? Let's just do a poll on that. And then if we have like a near this if we have a near tie, then we can go through it in more detail.
Well, I mean, I kind of disagree. It's kind of like the colleges in Texas getting rid of gender ideologies from their um, syllabus, but you're saying doing this on like a citizen-based level.
This is literally an assertion from a legal firm saying that Pam Bondi is going to go after with the Department of Justice, quote unquote, domestic terrorists, which we just defined in the prior assertion. We didn't define, but we said, what they're looking at as people who are potential suspects for domestic terrorism, the attributes that they're going after.
If the domestic terrorism is 18 U.S. Code 2331, we should ask if we agree with that.
The problem is that I don't know that the Department of Justice would agree with that if they're putting out this memo, right? So the domestic
So now,
terrorist, like we can.
so now we're assuming things. Of course, the Department of Justice is going to have to stay within the legal framework of the law. Otherwise, you're going to have opposition parties suing them. The media is going to jump on them, and the GOP loses.
We'll see about that. That's not what happened last time. Trump separated kids from their parents until the parents committed suicide, and still no one cared. I don't want to say no one cared, but not enough people cared. So, So we're not talking about an actual domestic terrorist. We're talking about a suspected domestic terrorist, and there is no legal definition of a suspected domestic terrorist. So that memo serves as such. So unfortunately, your definition is an after the fact definition. After they have committed violence, they can be called a domestic terrorist. Until then, they're a suspected domestic terrorist, and there is no legal definition. So hopefully that clarifies things for everybody. So we had a very clear outcome that we all agree that Pam Bondi is doing this. It was pretty clear from what I could see. And so now I kind of want to open it up for conversation. Oh, and then I wanted to talk about, sorry, one more assertion that I wanted to go through, and then we can open it up for comments and questions and around the table. Um, Actually, let's just open it up for questions, and I'm going to look for the next fact along the way. So, Carrie, go ahead.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, so I guess here's would be my question is, do you think that there's anything illegal in this presidential order? Because if it is, you can file for an injunction against it. And the standard that would be
Oh, are you going
used
to fund it, Carrie? Because if you'll fund it, I'll file it.
No, of course not. I
So,
I think there'd be very, very little return on investment.
and there would be very little return on investment of anyone filing such a thing. But
Sure.
even then, just because there's nothing illegal in it, technically does not necessarily, and even if there is something illegal, that doesn't necessarily mean you'll win in the courts. So
Exactly.
your point is, I'm not
Well,
sure what.
Well, my point is that this thing, if it doesn't say something that you think you have a substantial likelihood in prevailing on an injunction, you have to wait until you have an argument to actually use that you will prevail on. In other words, somebody has to be charged inappropriately, or there has to be an unequal application of the law, where it's like if they're only going after certain groups like political opponents. Oh, and I did post in the chat all the stuff about the FBI. It's quite voluminous.
I
The other
asked you to
thing
put
is,
it in the Google Doc, so I'm
oh,
not
I'm
going to be able
sorry.
to. I'm not going to be able to find it in the chat,
Yeah, yeah.
Carrie. Like the
No,
chat is like going
no
fast,
problem.
so put it in the Google Doc for me.
I will try and do that. But also
Thanks.
the crime, there is a crime of attempt, and it requires planning and at least a substantial step
A crime of attempt of what?
of anything that's illegal. I mean, right? You could attempted murder. That's a crime.
Well,
Attempted
attempted terrorism,
terrorism.
but even if there's a
Sure.
crime of attempt,
Well,
that
plenty of
requires
people are
someone to have
actually
done something.
no. See, I mean, there are people who are recently convicted, well, not super recently, for attempting to or plotting to kidnap one of the governors, right? And I think there's substantial step. It was a bunch of FBI informants got pizza and they met to plan this thing, and then they arrested them all and got convictions, I think. So that having a meeting where you plan violence is good enough. You can get convicted and thrown in prison. Yeah, and that was probably entrapment, honestly. But anyway. Go on. I'll go post
So
my stuff.
let me see if I understand your point. I think what you're saying is that if this memo has anything illegal, someone will sue Trump for it.
Well, they can, and if you don't think it's there, there's a likelihood. Be on the lookout. I mean, hey, people have used government to further their cause since there's been government, right? I mean, this is the world of realpolitik, right? I mean, get used to it. It's been going on since the dawn of time. And
I'm not going to
every
get
side
used
does
to
it.
the historical injustices of the world, Kerry. I'm
Yeah,
going to try
well,
to make the world a better place. Like that's
sure.
like saying,
I'm not
slavery
saying
had
don't
gone on for
try.
millennia. Why should we be
I'm not
against slavery?
I'm not saying don't try. I'm just saying when you do things like try to fight to have, gerrymandering not favor one side or another. Look at the heartache and heartburn that causes. Every side plays games. Their attitude seems to be if you're not cheating, you're not trying, and if you get caught, you're not trying hard enough. And I say, go ahead and fight. I don't want to see anybody using the law as a cudgel against anyone. I'm just saying that at this point, you're on the lookout. This is a notification, but until somebody actually charges somebody, there's not much anyone's going to do about it. That's my
Well,
point.
it doesn't even necessarily require someone being charged, right? It could just be spying for other purposes, right? Who knows,
Sure.
like what the, but
Oh yeah.
we'll see.
And again, then your defense is going to be getting the evidence against you thrown out because it was gathered illegally. I mean, this gets back to the FBI when they were, looking up Martin Luther King's, with a microscope, right?
Mhm.
Trying to find anything they could to smear him. That wasn't legal either.
Right.
What are you going to do about it, right?
Well, theoretically, we should get rid of the people who are actually doing it. Like those people should be fired from their jobs. And I think we should be doing the same with people in the Trump administration that are abusing power. The
From your
people who
lips to
told
God's ears.
the French scientist that came to the US and his phone was looked at and he had anti-Trump messages and he was told that he could be considered a terrorist in this country and he was sent back to France. Whoever
Now,
made that
that's
call should be
that's
fired.
probably legal.
That's not legal.
If you're
How
not
is
a
that
citizen,
legal?
you do not. If you're not a citizen, you do not have all the protections of the Constitution. But that's a different argument. We can talk
I mean,
about.
that's a whole nother.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but speaking out against the US government is a First Amendment right, and everybody has that.
No, everyone does not have that. Foreign
So you're
nationals
saying
don't
if someone's not a US citizen, they don't have the right to free speech?
not when they're applying for a visa for
They're
entry.
not applying for a visa. He was a visitor to our country on a visa.
All right, then they revoke the visa.
I
I'd have to
assume
look at
so.
that issue in particular, but I'm not so sure that I
You
think you
Google
can.
it. It was pretty terrible.
Yeah.
Gene, go ahead.
Okay, one second. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so I posted something to the chat on this in this whatever this is, but I also put a comment into your document that I think anybody can read offline easily. But I lost that. I don't know how to bring back my comment, but it did accept it. I put a check mark next to it. I don't know what that check mark means. But basically, I'll repost it there. Gemini basically says I asked the question, is the anti-Americanism, anti-capitalism, and anti-Christianity applied to all citizens, or does it apply just to self-described anti-fascists? And it said anti-fascists only. So I know your law firm said the otherwise, so I will vote no for your original poll. And that's all. I hope I'm not going out of order here.
That's okay. So you're saying that ChatGPT says that the comments about anti-Americanism only applied to Antifa.
Yeah, I
Then
did a very careful.
what is the purpose of the memo then? Why isn't it an Antifa memo?
I just asked about that paragraph. I read that
So
paragraph.
ask it what why it's making those comments. You can't use
fine.
ChatGPT to just give you the answer. You got to inquire.
I agree.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll read the entire document offline and
Highly
come to
recommend.
some other conclusion. Thank you.
Yep, no problem. Stephen.
Just for clarity, Gene used Gemini, and Gemini disagreed with ChatGPT. So, I don't know what we will go from that.
What do you mean, Genius Gemini disagrees with
Yeah, Gemini. I
ChatGPT?
use Gemini Pro, which
He
does
is
it spent
Gemini.
about 10 minutes doing a deep dive into all the documents. This was the longest. I do research with Gemini Pro, and this was the longest response I ever got for.
By the
Okay.
way, the freedom of speech does not only apply to U.S. citizens, it applies to visitors as well, people on tourists, students, business travelers, and undocumented immigrants, actually. It applies to everybody. So it says that Congress shall make no law, and it doesn't say anything about citizens only. So it applies to everyone. It also applied to the French scientist that was sent away because of his free speech on his own soil, by the way. His free speech was on his own soil.
Can I ask
Stephen, go
a
ahead.
question? Just
Yeah.
very
By the
briefly.
way, just I want to clarify for everybody, like the way that we do this is when you raise your hand, you introduce a new topic, and that's, take less than 2 minutes ideally to introduce the new topic with a comment or question. And then if you want to respond to something someone just said, just jump right in.
Yeah.
So that way we can have kind of a round robin across everybody.
So somebody posted in the chat that a domestic terrorist technically is a U.S. citizen. Is that correct, or
Not
that makes
necessarily, I don't think.
Well, I would
sense to
that was me, and my question I wanted to clarify. We've talked about it's a U.S. targeting U.S. citizens. By definition, aren't all domestic terrorists
Right.
citizens of that country? Because an international terrorist would be someone from another country, correct?
Yeah. So Sean, you make a good point that a domestic terrorist would technically be a citizen. I
U.S.
think.
Not
citizen. I think they'd
necessarily.
have to be. Well, how then? What would be a domestic terrorist who's not a U.S. citizen?
Uh, an undocumented citizen who became a domestic terrorist,
Okay,
or
so like
someone who came. The domestic terrorism means they are in our country, not that they are a U.S. citizen.
so were the 9/11 hijackers domestic terrorists by that definition
I
because they were
let me
living
let me
here?
look up the definition. I could be wrong. So
Domestic means more that they're attacking the country from within, not
That's what
from.
I want to clear. That's what I want to clarify.
no, domestic terrorists are not required to be U.S. citizens. It's defined by conduct, not citizenship. So it's anyone that commits an act dangerous to human life. So yes, the 9/11 guys were domestic terrorists.
Got it. So you're
It's that
attacking
it
the
acts,
country from within.
the act
Okay.
is within the territorial jurisdiction of the United States. So if it's Guam and it's a Saudi Arabian, it's still domestic terrorism.
Got it. So if I'm an American citizen and I live in France and I mail a bomb to America, I'm actually an international terrorist in that case.
Yeah,
Got it.
probably.
Cool.
Yeah. Don't recommend that. No, I'm just saying.
Probably not. Yeah.
So Stephen, you go ahead.
Okay. I kind of see this somewhat in existentialist terms, I guess. Some of you look old enough to have lived during the Nixon administration. I certainly did. I was in my 20s. I was called un-American at certain times. Didn't necessarily consider myself un-American, but you could be called un-American back then just for supporting a particular presidential candidate. I mean, I saw that around my activity supporting the George McGovern campaign in 1972. And one reason I became very suspicious of government, so you can call me somewhat a negative on what is now called, I guess, the deep state, the bureaucracy, is the way it was used, during certain presidential administrations. But I think what we're going through now is much worse than what I experienced during the Nixon administration. Now, I'm not personally been affected like I was then. I guess maybe I'm so old that I'm maybe not as active as I was, back then. But I've become more active. And to be quite frank, I have actually begun in 2024 to vote Democratic again. I'd been voting Libertarian for years, and I know people personally in both the North Carolina and South Carolina Libertarian Party, but I basically consider what is going on now a threat to democracy. And I'm actually in a state now, North Carolina, where my vote means much more than it did in South Carolina, certainly in presidential campaigns. So again, like I say, I consider this a kind of existentialist threat. But like I said previously, I believe our country will come out of this just as they did in those earlier times. And in fact, what went on during the Nixon administration spelled the end of the House Un-American Activities Committee, for example.
Thanks, Stephen. I hope you're right. And I am cautiously optimistic that we will get through it, but I think that we'll get through it because Americans come together supporting democracy and standing against the autocracy and the autocratic aspirations of those that are in power right now. So I also, by the way, will put into the chat that, and I don't know if this is relevant or not, but that ICE has basically reactivated a contract with Paragon Solutions, which does hacking into phones and hacking encrypted data like messages and files. They've also they bought AI social media monitoring platform, and they have lots of biometric facial recognition technology, and significant surveillance tool spending, license plate readers, data analytics, et cetera, totaling in the hundreds of millions under a broader enforcement funding bill. So there's lots of reporting of this stuff, and so this is kind of the tools that would be used to enforce the things that we talked about earlier. I'll put those notes in the chat. Paul, go ahead.
So I posted several times the Biden document, which in 2021 is functionally identical in every way. As a matter of fact, I ran both documents.
Can you put it in the Google Doc? Because I don't see it. If it's
I put it in. I'll link it in the chat once again.
Please.
I don't know what Google Docs or how to access or whatever, but I've linked it. It's National Strategy for Countering Domestic Terrorism in 2021 June, and it was a little bit of press at the time. That's where I remember it from. And I've been reading through it, and it is so close to the Trump document in form, even in form, that I wouldn't be surprised if the person who drafted the Trump document used this as an outline and simply filled in the blanks. And I will show you right now what I'm talking about. Today's domestic, and I'm reading from the Biden document. It's on page 6 if you want to follow along. Today's domestic terrorists espouse a range of violent ideological motivations. Sound familiar? He's about to list them.
But Paul, like you're not going to be able to read the whole document because it's really long.
I'm not reading I'm reading one paragraph.
And
please don't read. Look, he probably did pattern it after the Biden document, yes, but that's irrelevant of whether or not it was patterned after the Biden document. The question is, was it making assertions that are very broad and apply to just about every American as domestic terrorists? So
you're not letting me
quote that
part. Let him say that part.
If he's going to say that, but I know Paul, and I would be surprised if that's what he was
I couldn't even finish a single sentence.
Then
quit using prior stuff to keep complaining about a current topic. We're only talking about the current topic, Trump. The stuff in the past may or may not justify or overlap to what's happening now, but we're only asking
one
about
of the
Trump.
Assertions that's been made over and over again is that this is unprecedented. This type of document, this type of mandate has never happened before. And there's an identical mandate in 2021. And I'm just about to prove by reading 3 sentences, which will even use the same words as the Trump document.
Can you paste the 3 sentences into the chat as well?
I already did. It even names anti-government, anti-authority sentiment. It even has identical thing that you complained about earlier. It says so in the Biden document.
But it's
they
not
take on a
identical.
variety of forms. And then it goes on to list. It goes on to list freedom of speech issues. It's identical. It's the same thing.
Not even close. Why can't he just read 3 sentences?
You guys, you wanted right-wingers supposed to make comments. I have not been able to complete any more than 20 or 30 seconds at a time. All of you are jumping in. If you don't want participation, you don't have to have us here. But I have an
Paul,
extremely good point here, and you don't want to hear it.
Paul, you've spoken probably more than anyone other than me as the host.
Oh, you've got to be kidding.
Come on.
No, he's not kidding.
I'm not
That's
kidding.
absurd.
Yeah.
That's
We agree.
Not kidding.
Many people are going to agree
Definitely
with that.
not kidding.
And in
Garrett,
fact, Paul,
though,
next time
well-
I'll leave Read AI in so I can get the objective percentage that you're speaking. I'm going to add it back into the chat now so that we can see it for the remainder of the conversation.
I couldn't even finish. I couldn't even get to the main point.
Tell us your three
Let me
sentences.
try to calm this down. There is no parallel in any of Biden's documents to anti-capitalist and anti-Christian. Nothing. That is raw politics.
Paul, go ahead and read your three sentences.
I put
Garrett,
that in
can you just read his three sentences?
I put him in the chat. The ones he was going to read, I put him in the chat.
I already did.
Yeah.
All right. Now, can I finish,
just read them,
please?
Paul? It'll take you 20 seconds.
It would have, except I can't get
Stop whining.
past 10 seconds. And there
Just
we keep
do it,
going.
Paul. Just read them.
Go
All
ahead,
right.
let him read them.
All right. When Joe Biden issues this exact same mandate, only aimed towards right wingers, the specific traits were listed in exactly the same way. Now I need to find it.
I put him in the chat, Paul. Read from there.
I did. Just scroll. You'll see them.
I said I just did, so you don't have to refind
It
him.
talks about anti-government, anti-authority. It talks about bigotry. It talks about militias. It talks about radical, ethnically motivated ideologies. It's exactly the same thing, only coming from the left, aimed directly at the right.
But
It's
Paul,
identical.
Paul,
saying that
Let me
Biden is
finish a
characteristic of
sentence.
the right.
Paul,
Guys, we're talking
we-
about
end of the
this,
chat.
we can't say anything.
guys.
I
Paul,
think that's quite an admission. Bigotry is a
you're not
characteristic
reading the
of the
sentence.
right.
People can read it in the chat. It does say anti-government and anti-authority. The difference is that we actually did have militias violently revolt against the government with anti-government and anti-authority sentiment, whereas there are no examples of similar type of activities from people who are anti-Christian, for example.
Am I allowed to answer that?
Yeah.
Antifa has done more violent activities than the right wing ever did.
What
and
is
this is
Antifa?
aimed once again, this document that you're quoting from Trump is aimed by name directly at anti-terrorist, which is Antifa. Okay. So yes, they have committed all sorts of violent terrorist acts. You even yourself identified anti-government as how dare they prosecute anti-government. And the same characteristic was issued by Biden.
False dichotomy, Paul. So what I was saying
It's not a
is-
dichotomy.
Hold
It's
on,
what you're
hold
Can we
on,
lower the
Paul,
temperature, Paul? Let's do some emotional regulation,
Yeah,
everybody.
seriously,
and then
Paul,
start over.
no, Paul, no, stop. Relax. Paul, I know you really want to be right so hard that you're willing to yell for it, but please don't yell.
Hey,
Like,
Garrett,
just stay calm.
I'll be super calm and I'll be quick about this.
I'd like to respond to
live
what
in
Paul
downtown-
just said, Sean, if I could. So Paul, the difference is that saying that you're like the militias were actually anti-government and actually did try to kill members of Congress, and that has not been what the left has been about. That, and the other difference is that the comments of there are many other comments that were in the. Sorry, go ahead, Sean. What is it?
Yeah, I'll be quick. As far as whether or not Antifa exists, I live in downtown Chicago. I marched actually in the 2020 protests after George Floyd, with the hope that it was going to be like a peaceful protest type of situation. And parts of it was. There were some good ones, but there was definitely a violent element of people wearing all black, masked up, that came bringing spray paint, lighter fluid, and set fire to many buildings, broke through, busted up a lot of storefronts. And Chicago was known for through 2021 having boarded up buildings all the way through just because of the amount of domestic terrorism that was happening, including people getting beat up, including cars being knocked over, and they had to raise all the bridges down in around the Chicago River. They are a real organization, and they are typically pretty anti-government and consider police to be fascists. So this is a real thing.
Who runs Antifa?
That sounds like ICE. But okay.
It's like you said. It's similar to how Al Qaeda was. It's multiple cells. There's no single head. It's like a hydra.
It's just people who self-identify as being anti-fascist, and there's really no common thread between them other than they believe they're anti-fascist.
No, they actually have organizational structures where they have strategy books, they have tactics, they work with each other to share tactics.
Can you pull up a source for that?
Yeah, what's their mailing address? Where did
There's
they
not a
gather
mailing
together?
address. I just said they have multiple cells. It's not like there is a headquarters.
Guys,
Provide
tonight
those
is not about
Provide those links.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, go ahead and post the links about where you see that there's organizational structure to Antifa. Now, maybe there are people who consider themselves as Antifa that have some organizational structure, but there's no definitive organizational structure. There's no official organizational structure for Antifa. But nonetheless, I think most of us would be against Antifa committing violence against anyone that's not already committing violence themselves.
Yeah.
And
Sean,
the
may I
difference
ask you a
is that
question?
Antifa is not going to get pardoned by the president, whereas the January 6th insurrectionists were pardoned by the president.
Sean,
And their
as a
name is
point of- just a
anti-fascist,
question.
not anti-government.
Correct.
Just as a question, Sean, if
Very
someone you identify as Antifa commits a crime, should that person be prosecuted?
Someone I identify as Antifa?
Yeah, someone you say is Antifa, someone who is Antifa, say it however you want. If they commit a crime,
should they be arrested?
Anyone who commits a crime be prosecuted?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so we have a point of agreement.
Okay, good. Agreed.
Kerry, go ahead.
Okay. On the topic of Antifa, if you've got enough of an organization that at a certain time and date you can muster 100 or more people all geared toward a specific goal, that's clearly an organization just by default. That's the first thing.
Yeah.
Second off, the real point I wanted to make was in support of something Paul said, is legal drafting is like a chain letter, right? You always refer to previous documents, and to not do that could be considered malpractice. The reason is because previous documents have withstood scrutiny. And if the language works and you start to change it, now you're off the reservation and you have no idea what's going to happen if the document's challenged. So instead, you use the magic language that's been previously approved, and then you're okay. So that's kind of what goes on here. And that's why if you look at presidential orders, a lot of them look like they were drafted by the same person, because in a sense they have been. Again, the devil's in the details and how it's applied. Anyway, thanks.
By the
Could
way,
I say something?
Yeah, go ahead, Liz.
I think that there has been so much evidence of, shall we say, anti-government or right-wing planning for violence and violence in the past, that I can understand that being targeted. I have not seen organized violence like planning to kidnap a governor or to take over wildlife reservations or drive off people who are illegally grazing and not paying for it, and people showing up with all sorts of weapons to drive government officials who are trying to enforce the law away. What I have seen is in this administration that when there have been two people who have been killed by immigration agents, that there have been statements defaming them right off the bat. Absolute, utter lies told about them. This is what I have an objection to with this particular document under this particular administration. yes, it might sound like something that Joe Biden or, Barack Obama had drafted and had put out, but I swear to heavens, I have not seen any administration judge and defame people before any facts are out yet. And that is what concerns me about this. That is the primary thing that concerns me about this.
Thank you,
That's
Liz.
all.
And in fact, that is further affirmed by if you read the Biden strategy that was posted carefully, it actually explicitly states that beliefs and expression are protected, even if offensive or extreme. And it's pointing out the major differences that Liz is alluding to there between an administration that is specifically basically willing to lie, cheat, and steal in order to make the bad guys look bad. And what they don't realize is there's no one that's necessarily a bad guy, quote unquote. It's just that people, and I like to say, and when I say that, I want to give a caveat, which is evil is equal to good plus misunderstanding. The people who think that they're the people that we see that are actually doing bad, and I don't think Trump sees himself as a bad guy. I think Trump would look at himself and say, I'm doing the right thing. I think he just has misunderstandings. And because of his misunderstandings and his lack of social grace, he does a lot of bad things, and he has a lot of people supporting him to do a lot of bad things because they do have misunderstandings. I don't think they're evil people. I don't think they wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to be the guy that causes significant harm. I just think that they have major misunderstandings, and I wish they would do a little bit more work to try to look for reasons that they might be wrong. Anyone else we had all these hands up before. Where did all the hands go? So,
Spoke.
Go ahead.
No, the hand spoke.
I guess so. Anyone have other comments or, Paul, you have time now. You can say
Yeah, I
whatever you
think you
want.
should give
I just
Paul.
wanted to counter the claim that's a common claim. I've heard it a million times that Antifa is not organized. So what I did is I posted, I'm just the tip of the iceberg, all sorts of organizational websites. Most of them go back 15 years or more, devoted to organizing riots, bringing people together. It's going down. You couldn't possibly think of a better site to bring people to a riot. It's completely false that these are not sharing a common goal and are unorganized. It's nonsense.
Do you
So,
mean
Paul,
like
quick
do you
question.
mean like when Trump? Do you mean like when Trump told the January 6 people show up in D.C. It'll be wild?
Yeah, I don't know why that's relevant to the comment that
It is
Antifa is
very
not
relevant.
organized.
Same crap.
it's funny
Hey, Paul,
because
just a
Paul, when
foundational question. Paul, I'm assuming you're anti-fascist, right? Or like Antifa
Am
may
I
not
am I
be
against fascism?
anti-fascist.
I'm absolutely against fascism.
Okay.
So Paul,
But
that
I would
website that
be
you just
interested in.
posted, I don't see any, I guess, I'm just seeing it for the first time, but does it really say that these are intended to be riots? They don't
well,
look like
actually,
riots on the pictures.
I posted actually four websites. The oldest one, the most well-known, is Rose City Antifa. And I believe, yeah, Rose City Antifa is Portland. And famously in Portland, they had an entire year where they organized riots every single night. Every single night. Over 500 police officers were injured in Portland, Oregon. And they used the site to organize those riots over an entire year after George Floyd. And these are all linked to things like Twitter or X accounts, to WordPress, things like that.
Well,
If you want to know the specific ways that Antifa organizes, all you really have to do is go on X and look at Andy No, who is probably the most authoritative person on Antifa, and he has the most information.
but then
So
if they did illegal things, then they should be prosecuted. So
Well, that's
what's
right.
the
And I think
beef?
that's what Donald Trump is doing with this document.
No, he is not. He is
The
calling out
exact,
anti-capitalists and anti-Christians, and that is not the same thing. Not at all.
And it's
that's not what
also
I said.
But that's what he wrote.
Well,
and
what did he
it's
write? No. What he wrote was the same thing that Biden did, is he listed a bunch
No,
of
no,
characteristics.
no,
I've
because he
asked you
didn't
several
include.
times, where does Biden say anything about capitalism and Christians? He doesn't.
Why does he have to say something about capitalism and Christians when you're talking about a directive aimed at the right versus aimed at the left?
He
I don't
very much
understand your point.
Defined as what? Bigots?
Hold on, Paul. Let me just specifically say that it explicitly says in Biden's document, which Paul you say is not is quantitatively or is somewhat similar to. He specifically says that there is no ideological twist, whereas the ideological value sets of Trump are anti-capitalism, anti-Christianity, anti-border enforcement. The Biden administration didn't use ideological boundaries to say who they were going to go after or who they considered domestic terrorists. And it very specifically protected free speech, even with people who criticize the government. The Trump one did no such thing.
And Paul, if you're going to talk about this, I want to be respectful to you, but you're going to have to deal with that distinction, and you're not. I've raised it several times,
And
it matters.
it's completely irrelevant. You're not listening to why.
Not to me.
Well, it is no what it doesn't matter if it's to you. You're addressing my comments. And my comments are very, very simple. If you are aiming towards the right wing, you're not going to list anti-Christian as one of your attributes. You're going to list bigotry as one of your attributes, which was done. If you're going to be anti-right wing, you're not going to say anti-capitalism. You're going to say anti-government. You're going to say the various things listed under the Biden document. And by the way, to say that that's a significant difference, that Donald Trump calls out Antifa or anti-fascist, whereas Biden doesn't mention the word conservative. Every single news outlet back in 2021, because I remember this, was calling it, the Biden administration identifies right-wing hate groups as targets for investigation and prosecution by the FBI. This is how it was reported. And now to come back and say that a fair reading of this document says it's not aimed at right-wing groups. Are you kidding me?
No, I'm not kidding.
Is there some reason that you think right-wingers are more likely to be bigots than non-right-wingers?
If you are a progressive, that's the way you see it. Yes, absolutely.
Oh, projecting. There's three other people with hands up. Can we let
go ahead.
somebody else talk?
Yeah.
Okay. So just the Wikipedia page on Antifa says that the majority of Antifa people are not violent. They do not promote, and they're against violence, but there's a small there are some anarchists, etc. So you could just say that Antifa, like every other group, has bad apples. Or you could just say, well, they don't care or whatever. But since there's no formal qualification for whether you're a member of Antifa, is going to attract a broad range. And this was supported by several research groups who looked at this. I didn't finish reading the article, but you can go to Antifa on Wikipedia. Okay, that's my contribution.
Thanks, Gene. Sherry, go ahead.
You're on mute, Sherry.
Got it. Okay, I
Yep,
figured it out.
go ahead.
Okay, thanks. I'm kind of surprised by the overall approach here because I noticed what interested me about this particular discussion is that we were going to get beyond left versus right, and I should say identify myself as not being a member of either party or a supporter of either party. I think it's very dangerous to be a member of or to support a particular party, because if you do, you're going to go along with whatever propaganda they put forward. And unfortunately, it makes Americans adversarial to an extreme. I don't support the sort of systems that make us adversarial. I want to look at the larger system within which we try to survive.
I agree.
And this these current events that are being portrayed by the media and elsewhere is originating in the current administration. In no way do that. I mean, I think even Paul's been trying to say, and it's important for us to hear one another out on these issues, that the larger system, let's just say that the people who put the money in, who own the system, and I think that's a reasonable way to put it, have been moving forward in making, and this is what frightens me, beliefs or thoughts questionably legal. It's not clear that it's legal for me to hold a point of view. For example, Antifa is in itself a point of view, an anti-fascist point of view. Also, my opposition to the government making speech, my right to free speech, conditional on what I say, is in itself fascistic. I don't know if everyone here knows the term inverted totalitarianism. It's a description of our current system by a political philosopher at Princeton named Sheldon Wolin, who just died very recently. And he said that if you look at traditional totalitarianism, there's a bad guy who you can focus on. If you get rid of the bad guy, you get rid of the totalitarianism. But if you have a systemic authoritarian system, that's what he calls inverted totalitarianism, or neoliberalism is another way to put it. Now, if I say I'm opposed to neoliberalism, which is an extremity of capitalism, if I say that, I will be identified, according to relatively new legislation, not originating in the Trump administration, as a domestic terrorist. I'm anti-American if I oppose the neoliberalist method of running government. I am very concerned about making points of view illegal. And that is something that's being used by the current administration, but it certainly in no way originated with it.
Where would you say that the prior administration made points of view illegal?
I was very surprised that even while running for office, when I say Biden, by the way, I put in quotes because I think of him sort of as someone who's manipulated and was manipulated by deeper forces. I guess you'll have to say the deep state. I call it the permanent government myself. I don't call it the deep state. But he said that we don't have enough power legally yet to go after people who make public statements that are anti-American and therefore dangerous to all of us. And I was very threatened by that. How would it be? I don't see how what we think of as America can survive the government having the power to make an expressed point of view illegal. If you want to protect our democracy, which I don't think we really have, but let's say the shreds or the hopes for democracy, you have to protect the right to free speech. And both John Kerry and Hillary Clinton said during the last election that in order to be successful at governing in the U.S., we have to get rid of the First Amendment. I can show you where they actually said it. I was shocked that Clinton said we lose complete control. Now you could interpret that differently. What she meant control completely, or we had complete control. But she said we lose complete control if we still continue to use the First Amendment as we always have. The First Amendment has to become more limited, or we become a country that's ungovernable. Now, I find that a very threatening point of view. I really do want a democracy. I don't see how we can not expect worse to happen in the future without the right to free speech. And any politician with a D or an R after their name, I don't care, because I think they are funded by the same entities. Any administration that limits our right to speak in dissent is anti-democratic. And I feel most strongly that what I want is democracy, and I want to oppose a system. It's a system, not a person. A systemic change in the American method of governing that has made our right to speak, even if it's alarming what we say, our right to speak underlies any hope for democracy. And this was most focused. I became most aware of it when the Biden administration passed laws creating a category called domestic extreme or domestic terrorism, because it targeted certain kinds of beliefs, not even speech necessarily, but we only know what people think when they speak, of course.
Can you
beliefs.
Can you post a source for that, and
sure.
Ideally the Google Doc, so that it doesn't get lost in the chat?
I don't know how to do that technically yet, but I will learn.
Okay.
Yes. I think we should look at the system as a whole and not continuously focus on any one person who I think mans the reception desk for the purpose of the media and for purposes of what we like and don't like. But I think what we have to look at is radical systemic changes that have occurred not under the aegis of particular politicians or particular parties, but the larger, or as some people call it, two wings of a dirty bird. I think both parties are to the right of me, that's for sure. I'm a leftist, and to call the Democratic Party the left is kind of laughable to me.
I agree, it's laughable. They're the Republicans of when I was young. Like our whole political discourse has moved so far right that the left is still the right. And to answer your question about free speech, Trump has repeatedly threatened to revoke the broadcasting licenses of NBC and CNN for criticizing them, for criticizing him. He's basically blocked all federal funding for lots of higher ed institutions that he believes teach things that are anti-American. In other words, anti-Trump's beliefs. And he is basically not not given that money back unless they agreed to squelch all of the speech that should be considered free speech. So if you want to look at someone taking really severe action to punish people, including calling to revoke protest permits for rallies of people who are speaking out against Trump, and to crack down on protests against him. So there have been lots of examples of Trump basically threatening free speech over and over again.
If I can respond just quickly to your response
Yeah.
to me, just want to say that I understand it's satisfying to see one person as Satan.
No.
Yes, but I want
Yeah.
to say this, that in fact that does happen very frequently here. That is, I'm not sure. I didn't know that I joined a pro-Trump versus anti-Trump group. I didn't want to join that.
Yeah.
What I
That's not
wanted
what
to talk about was the system within which I try to survive. It's not easy. I've had cancer twice, and it's a big concern to me that I try to get a chance to participate in a system that gives me a right to survive and to be different. I am outside of the two-party system. I am well to the left of both parties. And most things that I believe and think are becoming illegal. I never had my point of view be a issue of legality before. Certainly one that may be unpopular, but unpopularity is also becoming illegal. And that's a systemic issue. I know you'd like to focus it as the idea is if we get rid of Trump, we can get rid of all these authoritarian things.
No.
I think that's a tremendous threat.
I
That's a
disagree
very
with that. Yeah.
dangerous point of view.
That's not my point of view at all, Sherry, because I said earlier, it's not Trump that's really the core problem. He's not actually smart enough to pull off any of the stuff
Right,
he's
I
doing.
agree.
He has people behind him, which is the Heritage Foundation, that is smart enough to pull off a lot of stuff, and they are pulling it off. He has Peter Thiel, he has Stephen Miller. There are, people who are the brains behind all of this. And those are the people that we should be concerned about that are much younger than him. Trump is not going to live for another 10 years, I doubt, if that.
I think you misunderstood what I said. What I'm saying is that Trump is not the issue. It's much easier to focus on a single person, as we're encouraged to do.
Yeah, I'm agreeing
But we're
with you.
encouraged to do that so that we don't look at the systemic issues.
I'm agreeing with you, and I do
I'd like
try
to
to look at the
focus on that.
systemic. I do try to look at the systemic issues, and the reason that you're sensing Trump and anti-Trump is because you're right that we've been divided into two camps, and my goal for these events is not coming across the way that the way that we're my goal for these events was to seek truth together, right? And to have
Yes, that's what
some
I
sort
hope.
of bipartisan agreement on what the objective truth is, or if we agree to disagree, to be able to say, well, I disagree with this and why, right? Paul explained his reasons for disagreeing. He pointed them out. Then everyone can make up their mind on whether or not they agree with what, Paul said, with what someone else said, with what someone else said. And so ultimately, the idea here is to get different, diverse opinions out into the air and then let everybody kind of make up our own mind about what to believe. But that includes sharing diverse perspectives, Sherry, and it includes sharing perspectives like yours that are well to the left of the left, and it includes sharing perspectives like Paul's, which I would argue is very lockstep with the right these days. Not that that's your history, Paul, but recently, I asked you in the Discord setting, like where you disagreed with with the right, and you gave examples, but you didn't actually give examples where you've publicly stated those things. You just made assertions, and I haven't seen consistency there. But let's not get into that. So let's let Carly go. She has her hand up next. You're on mute, Carly.
Sorry, thanks.
No worries.
Honestly, I've forgotten my 18 points I had because we ended up getting
I
into a
take
yelling
notes,
war
Carly.
between
That's
Paul and everybody, and
it helps to
it's
take notes.
overwhelming. What'd you say?
I said it helps to take notes. I take notes as everyone's going so that I can remember my points. So highly
Yeah,
encourage that.
I've got 5 different chat sessions up and 7 different windows, and I'm
I
talking
get
with
it.
AI at the same time and such too.
No
I
worries.
guess I thought that originally the point of domestic terrorism, at least the conversation about this and such, might focus on the bad actors as those who are violent and those who disregard law and those who don't care about humans or patriotism or American citizenship or the actual fundamentals on which our country is founded and tries to act. And so when I see things that are changed in order to target specific people or specific groups based on identities that are assigned to them, much like how people like to tell me what I think when they have no idea what I think because they're not in my head, that gets bothersome. And I hear a lot of that going on with this whole left, right, back and forth, and Biden did this and da 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 sort of thing. Like, who cares? I'm sorry. The point being is that on some level, I think it gets to be more helpful if we can actually sort of agree on what our values are together. Because invariably, this meetup ends up being, well, co-opted by people that want to argue about things, or loud or get to yelling or whatnot. And it's very two-dimensional. It's very polarized. And so I think it might be helpful to actually focus on where we have things in common and values. Rather, I don't know anybody in here that is pro-Antifa. I personally am anti-Antifa. Now, I'm also anti-fascist, but combining that thing doesn't make me Antifa, irrespective of if they're organized or they're not or whatever. And so if somebody else is labeling me as Antifa, shame on them, because that's wrong. I do not identify like that. We all might identify as anti-fascist, but probably not Antifa. The element that comes down to it for me is the violent aspect, the criminal aspect, and the intent. The intent to disrupt and harm and dismantle. Anyway, there's a whole lot there that we get completely overlooked here. And so focusing on one person or systemic issues, we're in this together.
I love what you're saying, Carly. And I'm sorry, did you finish?
No, I don't even know. There's more. I'll just ramble if you let me.
Keep going. Keep going. I'm going to take notes.
No, I was going to say, I don't know where to ramble on. I'll look at my notes and then come back to it. But I'm frustrated with this meeting too, is because it gets so overwhelming and we don't get anywhere real fast. I've got a board meeting I got to get to in just a couple minutes, so I'm going to be signing off. If I can find my other points that I wanted to make 20 minutes ago, I'll put my hand up, but we do have other people waiting to speak.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I really do want to try to find areas of common ground. That's really what my goal is in the sessions now. And what I want to do is find a process by which we can find that common ground without the emotion and without the he said, she said, and what about this, what about that. And that's why I'm trying to stay very laser focused on specific assertions. My hope is that the assertions I'm making are not controversial. Turns out some of them are, and so when they're controversial, I want to hear why does someone disagree with them, and then try to understand that and better get at a process by which we can seek truth together. So that's
that
my
I
goal.
respect greatly, Garrett. Thank you. And that actually brings me back to one of my points: is that sometimes with an assertion, it can be 1 or 2 words that was tweaked. And so somebody took issue with that assertion on your Google Docs, and I don't have it in front of me anymore, but one of those things might be, again, that with our current administration, people have feelings about them, and how they express those feelings in words ends up triggering other people, and they don't like that word, and we argue about it for 2 hours and waste a bunch of time. So it might be helpful to actually have people get on the same platform. So Google Docs is something that I do have access to if I could get to it in the course of all this other stuff going on too. But I very much would like to do a presentation that's going to be a lot shorter than the other ones, maybe next
Please,
week on some thoughts. I think
please.
that other people want to talk about what we've been talking, but we get rabbit holed down these. Again, I didn't want to talk about Antifa. That was not my point of being here today. I think the idea of what the government does in the name of the government and what the government does in the name of the people, which we are all of, respect other people from other countries and such. But there's a lot more here that we can actually be talking about productively and constructively rather than doing what everybody does on social media. I'm over it.
Yeah,
So
no, I'm
thanks.
100% with you, Carly. Thanks for saying that. And I'm gonna I'm I'm still not quite sure how to do it. So I welcome feedback from everybody. I'll put uh my email in the chat again. So if people have suggestions about how we can better seek truth together in sort of in a way that helps us find A, where we have common ground, B, where we disagree, and B, why do we disagree where we disagree? And, please feel free to share that. I'm going to do some thinking about that between this week and next week and see if I can find a better process than what we're using now. Because I agree our current process isn't working super well. I'm
Okay.
not sure exactly how to
And
do
we
better
still have
yet, but I'm going
three
to
people to
try.
talk. But
But
real fast, I was going to say
yeah,
I'm going to work on the rest of my presentation that is a much, I don't know, it's a little bit more nuanced than some things we talked about previously, but bring it into the same sort of aspect of where people get disjointed and upset and disaffected and angry and polarized and have to just yell and fight all the time rather than like do. So thanks, appreciate it.
thanks, Carly. Good to see you. Hope that your board meeting goes well. Rami, are you still there?
There we go. Sorry, it's the
Yeah, go
same
ahead.
Robbie as before. It's just this legal spelling of my first name, and plus I'm on a laptop this time.
Cool.
If I try to turn on my video, I'm pretty sure that I'd get knocked off the Zoom because my connection's so weak out where I'm currently located. The a couple points. One is that the reason why the monitoring is outsourced to companies is that companies can operate with unconcern for the laws that would restrict government, because the only thing that would hold them back is a government that selectively enforces the laws. And in this case, the government contracts with them to do precisely what they're doing. I think it's the much more rational position to assume that all internet traffic is monitored and screened through things that analyze voice and that go through all the strings that we're ever sending, and that we should take that as a baseline. The other thing is that Orwell was very good in providing us an illustration of the 2 minutes of hate. If we're going to waste our time in a continual 2 minutes of hate, that's just not worth participating in, which several people here have also made the same point of, and I applaud them all for seeing that. It is an office. It's not a person. And what is the function of the office? I'm going to posit that it serves primarily two roles. The first role is to draw the ire of the people, or at least half of them, and then to be the vehicle that just signs whatever's placed in front of them. Has that not functionally been it?
Sorry, say that again. What are the two vehicles?
The two purposes are to draw the hate in order to keep the country divided, and to sign whatever's placed in front of them, which then that opens up the question, well, who's coming up with these policies? I mean, is it just a continual divide and rule? Because it seems like that's it. And then look, again, as Sherry has stated, the overarching purpose of the system. We need to be asking that question. because I think I see what it is, but I'm hoping others will see it as well.
You mean what you're saying? What is the
Maybe we could
overarching
have that
purpose?
discussion.
You're saying what is the overarching purpose of the system?
Yeah, and the most of the politics these days is like the opening scene to The Simpsons, where Maggie is behind a little false wheel and steering wheel, and she honks the horn. I think that's all we have is that false wheel. Others have mentioned this. All right, and we're just being entertained by this illusion that we have some aspect of it. I think we've been handed this false wheel to argue over the steering of. Meanwhile, there's another set of who considers themselves the real adults in the world, who does what it takes to do what they think is right, which we may or may not agree with, but we're not connected to the actual levers of power anymore. And it's
So I think you're saying that, like Sherry was saying, that there is no real sense of democracy left, and that there's no real difference between the right and the left politically. Is that right?
well, it serves the function of keeping us divided so that we may be ruled.
Well, I do agree that people want us divided, but I don't agree that there's no tangible difference between the right and the left. Like there are very tangible differences. Sherry mentioned that she's had cancer twice, and I'm sorry to hear that, Sherry, but I'm glad that you're a survivor. There's one political side that wants to get health care for all Americans so that people won't, that the number one, I think one of the top reasons for people going bankrupt in the US is because of medical expenses. Why should that be in the wealthiest country in the world when every other part of the OECD countries that can afford it has nationalized healthcare? Well, there is one party that's striving for nationalized healthcare and got tens of millions of people healthcare under Obama. And there's another party that just took healthcare away from tens of millions of people. And that's a very tangible, real thing to those tens of millions of people who got care and then lost care under those administrations. So, there's a very tangible, real difference in impacting people's day-to-day lives. If you look at the big ugly bill, which we presented on, it's the biggest redistribution of wealth that we've probably known, other than the other ones that Trump did. Um, and it was basically redistribution from the poor, taking from the poor and giving to the wealthy. And so it was a huge redistribution of wealth.
Yes.
So, these things are very real. And, there's a very concerted
Yes.
effort by the Democrats to try to right the socioeconomic ship, and a very concerted effort by the Republicans to continue to make the ship more uneven keeled. And quite frankly, you're going to see a lot more protests when the poor become poorer. There are going to be a lot more violent protests. And if you look at what happened to the French when they had a huge socioeconomic difference, like there was born the French Revolution. So that said, I want to let you respond to that,
Yes.
Rami, and then we'll let Gene go.
Yes, all those things that you just said are true. And they also exist within the box of allowable political conversation.
Agreed.
But the real thing that we need to do is to see the full width of the spectrum of issues, which includes the things that both parties are working for or allowing or participating in because it enriches them by participating in them. And those are conversations that we're not having, but structurally could be killing us.
Yeah.
And they're not going to be discussed by the established members of the.
Did you mute yourself, Rami?
I do it all the time just to give others, knowing that it's.
But you were still talking, my friend. Let yourself finish.
Mhm.
So that's part of what I really want to do is find the common ground between the left and the right. Whenever you're in a room of, we were almost 50 people in the beginning, we're now 39. When you're in a room of 39 people with diverse political perspectives, I think we have to understand that given where things are politically in the US, there's going to be some emotions. Now, we do want to stay calm, and I appreciate, like Kyle's pointing out, like we need to stay calm. We do, because we don't listen to each other when we're not calm, right? And I got my glass of wine because I was getting frustrated, so that'll relax me. I do want to find common ground across the political aisle, and I want to I want to make sure we hear everybody out, but not only be hearing everybody out, where we make progress and we come to agreement on agreeable things and agree to disagree on other things, but still cover more ground. So I'm going to keep working on that. I welcome feedback from people about how to do it. I have some ideas, but I would love more. So that said, I'll let Gene go.
Make this quick. For Sherry, if you want to add comments to the to Garrett's document, you bring it up in a browser, you highlight a word, and immediately you will see two icons to the right. One of the icons is a box with a plus sign. You click that and you can enter a comment. I don't know if that's enough, but it's pretty easy. You can figure it out. Just click anywhere on the document. You'll see what I mean. Done.
I don't know if she has access to the document. Like I put that link in a while back, so I can put the Google Doc back in.
I want to say thank you. I'm not, I have to learn when you explain something to me, unfortunately, I have to know what your words mean in order to put it into action. So that's a little more complicated. I don't have enough background, but I want to say just one thing that's important to me. I appreciate now toward the end of this discussion that we're talking about systemic problems and not just focusing on are we for or against the particular idiot who's in a position of particular supposedly power. I don't think since Kennedy, presidents really have the powers that we ascribe to them. I think they act within the parameters of what's allowed them by the people who own our government, that who have the money to fund both political parties. And they do, the same entities do fund both political parties. That's just realistic.
Well, could I say something about
okay, just let me finish this one thought, which is that I'm distressed by the entire left versus right way of speaking, because again, I don't see the Democratic Party as representing the left because they certainly don't represent me, and I exist. I'm not an imaginary person. I just don't support the I think propagandistic notion that America is divided between red and blue. That's falsifying reality. And I want us all to share our concerns about bad things happening by the government without magnetizing it toward partisan thinking. And instead, that we look at, again, our moral underpinnings. What are the principles we share? I think we all are pro democracy. And if we say that, the right wing is destroying democracy and the left is the defender of democracy, I could explain to you if I had enough time, which I don't think I really need, that in fact we have had an ongoing diminution and attack on democracy that's gone back through both parties for a long time. It's not beginning now. That's just what I wanted to say.
Lori, go ahead.
I believe that both parties are corrupt, and they're both being funded by the same capitalistic organizations. And I guess you will, like APAC is very influential, and they could ruin somebody's career just like that by supporting the alternate candidate who supports Israel. And I don't want to get into that. I'm Jewish, but I absolutely think it's appalling what's happening there. But I think both of them have a lot of similarities. And I also think that they all think the same way. They just don't voice it in a lot of respects. I don't think they're that different. I mean, they are to an extent. Yeah, what you said before.
I gave some tangible examples of, Democrats giving tens of millions of people health care.
Yeah, I know.
Republicans taking away tens of millions of people's health care. Those are some pretty real, tangible differences. And then the redistribution of wealth that Trump has undergone, giving tax benefits to the multimillionaires and giving tax benefits to the corporations to tax their profits, even less. While taxing poor people essentially even more or taking away public benefits. Those are some pretty real, tangible differences.
Except that Democrats bring in millions of dollars. They're millionaires. So are the Republicans.
Oh yeah, well,
And
personal
this
wealth,
has to do
personal
with,
wealth is another story. Like I don't mind anyone being personally wealthy. I don't think there's anything wrong with being personally wealthy.
but
The
they take it
question
from the
is, are they getting wealthy
taxpayers.
because of their position of power? And if they are, which actually it's actually legal for the government to do insider trading, we should all be upset about
I don't
that.
think it's insider trading, though. I
Well, it
think you have
is.
these organizations. Sorry. These organizations like nonprofit organizations, and they give plenty of money to them. And I think it's being taken, use what you want, stolen, or I think people just put it in their pocket. And it goes for Democrats as well as Republicans.
Can I say something?
Go ahead, Jennifer.
Yeah, I agree that, both parties are similar in that sense, but the Democratic Party is the only one who actually wants to give benefits to the middle and the lower class people. The Republican Party seems to only want to give benefits to the most wealthy. And they 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 made it so that you have to they made it so that, oh God, I don't know how to put it. You have to like agree with certain things um that divide us. And oh God, I don't know really how to put it. That you have to see that, okay, if someone is liberal, that means that they don't believe in God, they don't believe in religion, they don't, you know, they want to redistribute wealth. I mean, it's stupid because these wealthy people have made, middle class people think they identify with the wealthy people,
Yeah.
you know, and because, they just say that they're the party of family values, and it's it's bullshit because we know, how many of them have been caught, with kiddie porn and you name it, they talk about gays, but how many Republican um,
Try to finish your thought, Jennifer.
how many Republican politicians over the years have been, caught doing things, homosexual things. It's just bullshit, and I don't really know how they get people to buy into this, but I think they do. They have established this thing about morality, that they identify with morality, and anybody who doesn't agree with them is immoral in some way.
Yeah. Thanks, Jennifer. Appreciate your comments. By the way, it's almost 10 after 9, and I really have to go soon, but we haven't
Yeah.
really heard from Josh, so I would like to skip to Josh if you don't mind, Paul. Go ahead, Josh.
Thanks. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
Hello? Okay.
Yeah, go
Yeah.
ahead.
I look at, I admire the sentiment that you've expressed and a few other people have expressed about trying to come to agreement. That is to say, you're trying to focus on what the two sides in common. But I say that there's no chance in hell that you're going to achieve that goal at the same time that continually arguing against what would be false equivalence. That anytime someone says, well, anytime someone indicates or introduces a certain level of relativism between the two responses, it really is true that the relative these terrible things
You're breaking up quite a bit, Josh.
never going to reach that over. Is this any better?
Now it sounds
here?
better. Try again.
Hello? Okay.
Oh, we lost him. All right, Paul, go ahead.
So I think the goal of having both sides reach a common version of reality is an important goal. But what's frustrating to me tonight is I presented two documents which are functionally identical. And to prove it to myself, not to the room, I was using AI to kind of run down all the differences between the two, since AI can scan the entire document. They're both very large. One of the key things that I teased out of this is when I ask if there's any difference in enforcement, in legal justification for enforcement. And this is the word for word AI enforcement under each administration. Sorry, let me just get down to the other one. It said there is, yeah, I thought it was all teed up here. Essentially, it said that there's no expansion of enforcement. There's no expansion of any type of government intrusion. They're both basically the same. They're both policy documents that use existing laws and existing powers in order to pursue the goal of each administration. And I did try to find out whether the Biden document was aimed squarely at the right. And both in chat and also AI did indeed say that in the Biden document, the sovereign citizen movement was named specifically being anti-capitalism. And they were named specifically as a right-wing terror group. Anti-capitalism is exactly the same thing alleged in the Trump document. Anti-government is exactly the same thing alleged in the Trump document. These two proclamations by each president are functionally identical. I found, and through judicious,
Please
use
finish your
of
thought, Paul.
AI,
We've heard you say that multiple times, and I gave you very specific examples of very big differences where the Biden document very much protected free speech and the Trump document did not. So there are very tangible differences. I want to hear from Barbara because we haven't heard from her
I
tonight.
showed you there were the
I
same with
I
regards to
I
free
know you
speech.
think that, and I know you've said it multiple times. You've asserted it over and over again. That doesn't make it true. The actual quotes from the document that I gave show that they're not true. So, Barbara, go ahead.
Okay, I'm going to try to be quick.
Thank you, because I do have to get my kids to bed. But go ahead. And I don't want to let Josh finish. He got cut off. He got disconnected. So go ahead, Barbara.
Even if both documents are saying the same thing, if both documents are limiting my free speech, both documents are wrong. Two wrongs don't make a right. Therefore, I do not think that Paul's support of the Trump document is valid by saying that Biden said the same thing. If Biden in fact said the same thing, he was wrong also.
And we would all agree that he was wrong, even those of us that supported Biden, if it was squelching free speech.
Right. Whether or not he actually did or not is not the point. The point is, I am against having my free speech limited. I don't care who does it.
And I'm against having anyone's free speech limited, and I bet you are too, Barbara, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I see that Paul continuing pointing out both documents are the same has anything to do with what we're talking about. If they are the same thing, they're both wrong.
And Biden's document very specifically did say free speech is still allowable. You can still say very anti-government things, and that's totally fine. There was a complete difference in tone of the two different documents, and AI pointed that out quite easily, Paul. So I'm really shocked that your AI didn't do it. You
Show
should
me
really
where
look
Trump,
at, you
the
should really
document
look
says
at,
that.
hold on, you should really look at the prompts that you're putting in there. Because if you would like to share your complete prompts with me, I can probably explain to you as an AI guy why you're getting what you're getting. That said, I want to let
haven't
Josh.
seen anything where Trump says free speech is not protected. Nothing.
So, Josh, go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah. What I was trying to say before was that there needs to be a certain allowance for a bit of relativity such that when we say, well, the other side doesn't do these things and our side does, that is to say, we argue against what we call false equivalence, that will never get us toward the kind of accommodation that is a lot of people's goals. because you can't in one breath say, well, we want to reach a certain kind of acceptance of each other on the one hand, and on the other hand say, no, but we have to draw a line here because it is a matter of fact that our side are the good guys when it comes to this issue and the other side is the bad guys. Instead, I think that when you have a situation where a society breaks up into two different cultures, happening, and more specifically, those two different cultures are geographically divided in such a way that the cities more and more, and it's just going to get worse, are going to be more and more concentrated with a certain kind of a way of looking at the world, which is going to seem more and more alien to the rest of the country. Essentially, you're going to end up with a situation that's similar to what you have when you look at the difference between countries, very different cultures. I don't think that we would be so accepting of the idea that we need to reach our hand out to some society on the other side of the world that has a very, very different culture from us. I think that our response there would be, well, we need to have our own values represented in our community, and we need to be separate from them. We can respect them from a distance, but we can't really work with them and mix with them if there's such a huge gap between the way we look at the world and they do. And I think that I'm not saying that that's necessarily what we're doomed to, but it might be, at least for the near future. And we have to be prepared for the possibility that the best way to be able to treat each other with respect is over a divide that protects each of us, each side from the other. And there are ways of doing that. Soft secession is a wonderful way of doing it. Not a hard secession, but a soft secession where, there are a lot of ways in which we can kind of unplug from, for example, I read that, the federal government decided to take the flag, the rainbow flag away from the Stonewall Monument in Stonewall, which is the base of the origin of the LGBT movement. Well, it's because it's federal, but you can turn it over to the state. And that's one way in which you can sort of move towards soft secession. There are a lot of gestures like that allow, municipalities and blue states to be able to plug the holes that are of what's being taken away from them at the national level. And I think both sides would cheer that on. It's something that everybody can agree on. Yes, let's separate.
So Josh, it's states' rights when it's convenient, but right now there's a lot of federal rights being presumed. And guys, I really do have to close out. It's quarter after. We usually end strictly at 9. So I want to thank everybody for the thoughtful dialogue, the great conversation, and the sort of steering direction and trying to move us in the direction that we want to go, which is seeking truth together and really trying to find common ground, and where we don't have common ground, try to understand the perspective of people without that common ground and why they have those opinions. So that said, thank you all. Hope you have a great night and hope to see you guys back next week. And I will hope to see you then. Thanks. Bye-bye.